And there are other physical body densities, but they're different frequency, different density. So
yeah, they had a different frequency than we did. And I felt like this was way too fantastical for me to just imagine up, you know? I was like, I've had a dream journal before. I've written my dreams down, and I've experienced, you know, trying to remember them pretty well. But this was, you know, I wrote like a 32-page document about this experience, and I was like, this is way more than...
Well, okay, so what I want to know is...
drummed up, you know, from my own
I want to know some of the details, because I really think the only reason that timeline and this timeline were colliding was that we are about to experience what they have already experienced, and that is, you know...
You got to accentuate the positive. Wow, I feel good. Goes a long way.
You're listening to KAren Swain, teacher of Deliberate Creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
And remember, if you'd like to play with your consciousness and expand your horizons and find out more about who you are as a God, Goddess, creator of your reality, join our webinar series, The Inner Sanctum. What we do is I invite some of the guests that I have on the show to come on each month, and we explore what they're talking about. Last month we had the beautiful Danielle Gibbons, who was channeling Mother Mary, and she gave such a gorgeous message about self-nurture and self-care and self-love, and especially as people who are teachers, spiritual teachers, putting themselves out there, nurturing other people. And next month we have Robbie Holtz. We're talking about the secrets of Aboriginal healing and awakening. Also, each month I put on a webinar. Yesterday we had Meet Your Spirit Guides, so connecting you to your spirit guides, your galactic family, and your mob. I call my guides my mob. We talk about manifestation. We talk about manifesting what you want, how you are the creator of your reality. So join us in the Inner Sanctum, and thanks. Welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive with KAren Swain, expanding your reality, awakening consciousness, and having some delicious conversations with open hearts and inspired minds. So great to be with you again. I have a fascinating young woman to speak with you today. Her name is Allison Gee, Goddess Allison, she calls herself. She's a preschool teacher, and she has a fascinating story to tell. Maybe if a few of you have been looking on YouTube or Googling, you might have seen her story, but there's not a lot of her on YouTube or on the internet. But she was exploring consciousness and watching a whole lot of YouTubes and Gaia, and of course when we focus on something, we get to create our reality, no matter how bizarre or fantastic it is. And that's exactly what Allison experienced. She experienced going to different parallel realities and exploring timelines. So we're going to have a discussion all about that today. Welcome to the show, Allison. So great to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I love that you're a preschool teacher. I love that she's working with the new kids, you know, the new kids on the block. I'm such a big fan of the children. I think the children are just coming in with a consciousness. It's just much more expanded than the majority of us. And anyway, let's get into your story. So let's start at you exploring consciousness and what you started, you know, questions that you were asking yourself, because you said to me when we had a bit of a chat before that you watched a lot of different programs. What were you thinking? Like, what were the questions you were asking?
Well, I have a lot of experience in holistic health and wellness, about over 10 years of experience, and I don't have very many strikingly paranormal experiences, like with angelic visions or ghosts, or I don't have any conscious memory of interactions with ET, but lately, since September of 2015, I have been watching Gaia TV, and I feel like that has really helped to open my consciousness to a new level. And I was watching Gaia TV, and I was listening to some YouTube videos by a woman named Bridget Nielsen, and I also read a book by a woman named Barbara Lamb. She wrote a book called Alien Experiences. So before in my holistic training, I wasn't really open to a lot of the information about aliens, UFOs, conspiracy theory, and that sort of thing. But I think this information helped me open my consciousness in a way that was what I was ready to receive, in a way that made sense, and in a way that was practical for me to understand how it all fits into the big picture of this planet. And many synchronistic things happened to get me into this information. And after I signed up for a retreat in Sedona with Bridget, shortly after that, I had a very strange paranormal experience in what some people might think of was my sleep or in dream time, but I know that this particular experience that I had, it was not a dream. And what happened, in summary, basically, I was taken from my bed in Seattle, Washington, where I live, and I was taken to a parallel timeline, which is how I understood it after my visit. And I experienced 3 days time in this parallel timeline in what I could only deduce was some kind of facility, or I call it a hospital, a timeline healing hospital, but it was a facility, and it was in Anaheim, California. And then I was sent back to I call it my native timeline. And for me, 3 days had passed within the span of 3 of our hours. Mm-hmm. So it was the same day that I had been taken, about 3 hours later. But for me, I had just experienced 3 days in a parallel timeline where they'd had, this was a post-disclosure timeline. So in this timeline, it was 2016 for them, and I was in America, I was in Anaheim, California, and they had the disclosure from the American government somehow to the American people of the issue of extraterrestrials and UFOs. Like, the truth came out in the early 1950s. Mm-hmm. Shortly after, my caretaker in the hospital, I'm just going to call it a hospital, it's a facility, but my caretaker in the hospital said that it happened shortly after the UFOs were spotted over Washington, D.C. in 1952. So their society progressed from there, and they had all of the technology that we would have if our corporate and governmental elite and military elite wasn't holding it from our society. And they were able to understand quantum physics better than I think we do here. And they somehow were able to take, I would call it, our astral or energetic bodies from our native timelines and put it into this facility, and I was able to interact with myself in other timelines. And basically, I think what they are attempting to do is help heal timelines like ours, where we don't have this full disclosure of this extraterrestrial and flying saucer issue, where we're not yet a spacefaring race. We are not yet given that jump into what some may call fourth density civilization. So that's basically what I experienced. It was
okay.
Really great.
So many questions come up, listening to this story, and I would imagine that people are, who are listening to this thinking, she just had a dream, or it was just some fantasy of her imagination. And yesterday I put on a webinar connecting to your spirit guides, and one of the girls said, when I did a visualization, or when I did I took them somewhere, she said, look, I think it was just my imagination, but I want to get clear about imagination. Like, I read years ago in the Seth books that every thought that you ever have becomes manifest. So there is no such thing really as imagination just being fantasy, because any thought can become manifest in this multi-dimensional, infinite possibility, multi-universe. So that sort of dispels that, she's just having a dream. But we do have dreams that are kind of crazy. How do you know it was not just some crazy dream, and you actually experienced something beyond the dream state, like it was an astral adventure.
Yes, and what was strange to me about this experience is that I experienced things that you don't experience in a regular dream, that science says your part of your brain is not active for instance, reading words on a sign, or experiencing time passing, or just little things like that, things happening in a very logical and chronological order and making sense in relation to my life here. Whereas dreams often make sense within the context of the reality of the dream, but they don't often make sense directly in correlation to your life and your consciousness in your waking reality. And this experience very much did relate to my life here. And another thing that really stood out to me during the experience, I saw myself from other timelines as a baby, a child, an elderly person, a teenager, in different stages of life and from different timelines. Like I had very different lifestyles. And I remember during the experience, feeling like I had been there before to this facility and thinking, oh, well, this baby and this child, they're scared and it's okay, it doesn't matter, because they're just going to be sent back home. They're going to wake up from the experience just like it was a dream, even though it's not a dream, and they'll just go back to their normal lives and it'll be fine. And this elderly version of me, I knew that she was aware that this experience wasn't a dream and that she was going to go back and wake up and be sent home, knowing full well what her experience was here and what it meant more than I did. So I feel like in dreams you don't think, oh, it's no big deal, we're just all gonna go back and wake up like it's a dream, even though it's not. And I really had a sensory sense during the experience. Like I remember what a monkey's fur felt like. I remember how deep my fingers sunk into the fur when I picked up the monkey. I remember eating and what things tasted like. And it's just, in normal dreams, you don't have that sense of the five senses. Like I think you might if somebody, and I didn't really understand until I had a hypnotherapy regression session about this experience, but I think that because people like Corey Good says some ETs have the technology to pull our astral body from our physical body and take us that way and work on us and either help us or whatever they do. And I think these people from this timeline, since they had all of the technology that from our perspective that ETs have, they had the technology to take what I would guess would be our astral or energetic body into their facility or what have you. And in that body, you might experience touch, and you may experience telepathy and eating. You might have to eat. I don't remember going to the bathroom ever during the experience, which I stated in the document that I wrote, but that was kind of weird. I didn't have to wear glasses and, have glasses in my life here. So I would guess that was some kind of technology. And my computer acted very strangely before the experience. My computer in this timeline, the one I'm talking to you on right now, it kept waking up from being asleep and it wanted to update itself sometimes. And I was just like, what is it doing? I need to shut it down. And I thought I'd shut it down, and then it was awake again a little bit later, and it kept waking up even though it was supposed to be in sleep mode or like hibernation or whatever it's supposed to do. And it never does that, And so I after the experience, I remember from reading Barbara Lamb's book or hearing something about alien abductions that oftentimes before an abduction, the electronics might act funny. And I thought, oh, that's so convenient of them to have this technology that they do. So being honest about what happened to me, how I experienced it from my perspective and my perception. And I wrote a large document and made YouTube videos, and I mean, if people don't like the information, that's okay. They don't, they don't have to. And
let's explore what you went through. So when you woke up so it's, excuse me, I've got a tickle in my throat. It's interesting to know the difference between a astral projection experience and a dream. I was having this discussion with Cyrus Kirkpatrick, who can astral project anytime he wants to. He just deliberately does it, and he has this experience of living two different lives, this reality and another astral parallel reality where he does different things. And we were talking about the difference between dreams and astral projection, because he has the ability to do it consciously and deliberately, whereas most of us do not.
Right.
Well, I don't anyway. I'd love to know how to do it, to tell you the truth. I've been trying to do it every night. But when we fall asleep and then wake up again, we have to sort of like bring this memory back. And when we get focused on our physical lives here, often the memory of what we've experienced at night fades. And
yeah, this one didn't for me. And that's how I knew it was something was off about. And even when I was there, something seemed to be wrong about my visit, or not wrong in a negative sense, but something seemed to be amiss, where my caretaker wasn't sure what to do with me. And I think it had something to do with how open my consciousness was compared to what timeline I came from. And I remembered everything that happened just like it was an event that happened yesterday. Like if you would have asked me what I did yesterday, that's how vividly and how easily I could recall it. Even after I woke up, a lot of dreams, you remember them when you first wake up, and then you go about your day and you forget them later. This one, it's stuck with me even now. Like if you wanted me to recall everything that happened, I could generally tell you, day by day what happened to me. So
let's just explore it. So you awoke into a new reality, and you were in a room with a person who you call your caretaker. Yeah. Did he have a name? What was his name?
His name was Nicholas, and from what I understood when I awoke in that room, I thought I was in a hospital. I literally thought that I had been injured or something had happened to me, and I had been taken to a hospital, and I just had no memory of being hurt, and maybe these people had found me, maybe they were my friends, or maybe they had found me at the accident and brought me to the hospital, so they thought they were my friends or caretakers or something, but I didn't know. And then when he came up I was laying in the bed, and he came up to my bed, and I was like, oh, I recognize this person somehow. I don't, I didn't remember in my physical life here. I didn't remember who he was, but he was like, oh, everything is all right. You're fine. Just be calm, and Peter will be along soon. And I was like, oh, I remember Peter, and this is Nicholas. And Peter is Nicholas is a younger gentleman, maybe in his 30s or late 20s, and maybe more around my age. I'm 33, even though people don't think I am most of the time, but he seemed more around my age, and he was with me I would say all the time that I can remember being awake in I'll just call it a hospital, because that's.
Hang on, I'm just going to pause you because you've frozen for a minute. Alrighty. So we just had a bit of technical interference then. We were talking about, so you woke up, Nicholas, so you woke up in a hospital facility, and you just thought that you were experiencing this timeline like your life.
Yeah.
And you thought, oh my God, I've had an accident. What's happened to me? And obviously you're asking questions. Did you ask him some questions like, where am I? What happened to me?
I don't remember. When I woke up the first time, I don't remember what specifically I said, but it must have been something like, where am I or what happened? Because I could see that there was a person standing a little ways off. And so he came up to the bed, and I was like, oh, I recognize this guy. And he was like, it's all right. Everything's going to be okay. You're all right. Peter will be here soon. And I was like, oh, I remember this guy somehow. He's familiar. And I remember Peter. He's the older he's an older, like more doctorly gentleman, and I think he was more in charge of the whatever experiments they were doing with me, or whatever work it was that they were doing, because he would only come in sometimes when they were running sessions, and then Nicholas was like always there to take care of me. And so he came up to the bed and was like calming, reassuring me, and I was like, oh, everything's fine, I just go back to sleep. So I thought I was going back to sleep, and maybe they were gonna fix me up in the hospital, but I wasn't in a hospital here.
So when did you figure out that you were like not in Kansas anymore? From that famous movie. We're not in Kansas anymore.
A few events happened, and from what I understood, they had virtual reality in the hospital. Like, I already knew this somehow. Like, I had been there before to this hospital, and I couldn't remember specific events or specific things that happened to me, but I just remembered common knowledge, like, oh, they have virtual reality and that's normal. Like the holodeck on the Star Trek show that we've seen. And so they did sessions with me, and that was normal. They were just doing sessions to try and deduce some kind of information about my personality or my timeline or something, I don't know. But so the first session, they were pretending to be spiritual people. They were dressing in clothes that I see my friends in. I just say spiritual people. It's like the festival artsy type people that I hang out with, and
creative collectives or collective creatives or new age people or whatever.
Yeah, I live in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle in the United States, and it's full of those kind of people. So they were dressed similarly, and we were in a sort of place that seemed familiar to me, but I knew it was virtual reality, so it was no big deal. And they were asking me about kombucha, how to make kombucha, because I've self-published some books in this reality, and so they wanted to know about how to make kombucha, and they're asking me about that, and I was excited to talk to them. And then something strange happened, like the door to the room turned into a brick wall, like I was trapped in the room, and I feel like they wanted to see how I would react, but instead of being scared or frightened, at first I didn't know what was going on or how I was going to get out of the room, but then I just turned to them and I said, look, I know this is just virtual reality, so it's like kind of like knock it off kind of thing. And then the whole I guess session or experiment or virtual reality is shut down, and then the hospital room looked normal again, and Peter and Nicholas were back in the clothes that I normally saw them in, which was like not formal but very typical for, I would say, my timeline. Khakis, polo shirts, just very, not even like they were at work or that they had a uniform, just like civilian clothing, And Peter, I could tell he was a little upset or just out of sorts, because maybe this session didn't go the way he wanted it to. So he kind of stormed out of the room, and I went after him to see what was wrong. And he kind of came at me and he said, those timelines you leaked, whatever timelines they were, and I think he meant whether they were positive or negative timelines. He said, whatever timelines they were that you leaked, you gave them more energy and they're more likely to happen. And I was like, what are you talking about? Did I make YouTube videos, or what are you talking about? And so I think he thought that I was a different Allison from a slightly similar but different timeline. Maybe because of where my consciousness is at from watching Gaia TV and just being all so very open and accepting and just not even fazed by this technology, or somehow I knew that this was virtual reality. And so he must have thought that I was a different Allison in that moment, or been confused in his emotional upset. And then I had to carry around a device with me, which they had disguised it as the like iPhone, iPod type device that I just normally carry around in my life here, so I would behave normally towards it. And then the screen, it was like making maybe it was it was me talking on the screen it was like a voice in my pocket. So I took it out and I showed him, and she was talking to him on the screen of this device and basically telling him, look, you got the wrong Allison. It's a happy kind of synchronistic mistake. What are you going to do about it? I'd like you to think carefully kind of about what you're going to do about this mistake. You just basically like letting him know, hey, you just shut the virtual reality off. This is the wrong Allison. You meant to scold me, kind of thing. And I didn't know what they were saying. It's kind of like when you're a kid and your parents are talking and they're having a discussion, but you understand the words, but you don't really know what the hell they're saying. And so it seemed fine, but I didn't know what was happening, so I didn't know what was going on, and Peter wouldn't explain it to me, and I couldn't control my body, and my body was just kind of being, I guess, programmed or forced, I don't know how to describe it, into the fetal position on the floor. And the last thing, I was kind of like begging him, the last thing I said before I lost consciousness was like, what timelines did I leak? Like, what are you, please like explain it to me. There's, something I was like begging him to tell me what was going on, what was happening, but I just like lost consciousness. And before I lost consciousness, I thought, oh, well, I don't know what's going on, but it's no big deal, 'cause I'm just going to wake up back in my life and it's, I'm not going to remember this and it's going to be fine. And then I didn't wake up back here in my life, and I woke up in the hospital again, and a couple other sessions happened, and I didn't really know what was going on. And then the third day I woke up, I wasn't in a session, so they usually ran sessions with me. And I just call it the third day, but it was really like a morning time that I was there, and I was just kind of hanging out in the hospital room, which was odd to me. And I had been there too long. I felt like I had been there longer than they usually kept me. And I asked Nicholas, I said, when are you going to send me back? And he said, oh no, you can't go back yet because we need you to heal the other timelines. And by this time I had interacted with, myself from other timelines and done another session with them. So I was like, oh, maybe because of all this Gaia TV that I have been watching, my consciousness is at a different place now, and I can help heal these other selves of me that are from other timelines. I can help heal them better because of where my consciousness is at. So I just figured, oh, they're going to keep me here, and I don't know how long it's going to be. And then I went into an operating room that was like adjacent to my hospital room, and I saw myself on a table. I was a teenager, maybe like 13 to 16 years old, and I got the sense that this girl was dying and they were trying to save her. And they had brought in me and other me's from other timelines at different stages of life. There's a baby, a child about 5 or 6, maybe 8 years old, because I look very young for my age, so I couldn't even really tell how old I was. And then there's an elderly version, me from another timeline. And the nurse that was attending to this teenager on the table was humanoid, but she wasn't human looking like us. She looked, to me, because of all my cosmic disclosure education, I just thought she was a hybrid between a gray alien and an insectoid humanoid, and didn't have any clothes on that I could tell. Seemed like she was naked, but that wasn't unusual. And so I had that experience in the room, and then I came back into the room, and I was just like, I don't know if that girl's gonna, I was thinking, I don't know if she's gonna die or if she's gonna get well after they send her home and she wakes up. And there was a monkey that was sent into my room for like emotional well-being, companionship, and comfort, I think. And my impression was that if they had other beings in this hospital, they would send some people might not know what this means, but the second density life form that they were told they had evolved from. So for us in our timeline, we were told you evolved from a monkey, right? So they sent in this monkey. It was as big as like a small dog or a large cat. And I don't know how smart it was, but it was very loving, and it had been trained to be like emotionally affectionate and comforting. And so I knew that this monkey, I had seen it before, and So it was like my pet, but it was doing a job there in the hospital. And I got the sense that if there were other beings in the hospital, say like bird people, they would have sent birds in to help them, be calm and comforted. And so I got a monkey, and his name was Muffin, and I picked him up and I held him, and he had a digital tag on. So my iPod device that I was describing about on the first day, it was in like my left hip pocket or dangling on my left hip somehow when I picked it up. And this monkey also had a tag on his left hip, like a collar, but it was around his waist instead of around his neck. And this, I think, was the first time I had noticed this monkey had this collar or tag, but I understood that it was a digital tag. It felt like cloth. It felt like fabric, like that reflective material on the jackets that traffic workers wear, that kind of stuff to, people can see in the night really well. It felt like that material, and I knew that it was a digital screen somehow. So they had some great technology, I guess, to turn
was he like a digital hologram, the monkey, or was he?
No, the monkey was real. The monkey had a tag on his hip, like a collar.
When you say real, the monkey was third dimensional physical reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was like they sent a cat or a dog into my room to help give me companionship and emotional support.
Let me ask you, did you ask about the current timeline that you were experiencing?
At that time in my experience, I didn't realize where I was or how it related to the life that I knew here. And so something happened. There was a message on this monkey's tag, and I asked my caretaker about it, and he looked really taken aback because it was before the presidential election in the United States, and I didn't know how long they were going to keep me here, and this message seemed to be some kind of message about the presidential election. And I kind of asked him, if they have the election, I said, if something happens in my country before, if something happens in my country while I'm here, would you tell me about it? Or would I be able to watch the news or something like that? And he kind of looked a little taken aback, like later on, I realized that he almost forgot that we had presidents because they didn't have presidents there anymore. And so he didn't know what to do about me or how to respond to what I was asking him. So he said, come over near me. We're going to go to the roof. And I was like, oh, good, great. I don't know why we're going to the roof, but we went up to the roof like we were teleported there, something like they had short distance teleportation technology at least. And then I was out on the roof. It was like I was in public at this hospital. It was like I was at the front entrance of the facility or the hospital. But we were on the roof, and I could see the city that I was in. I didn't know what city it was. I could see the architecture. I could see the people, like the public walking around. It was almost like we were in a busy airport or busy train station or something. People were coming and going. There were shuttle buses in the distance, and I could tell like they were flying off the roof or something, and they landing, and they had some kind of, it looked like a street, but it was like some kind of orderly or organized way that they were going and letting people off the buses. And so I was out in public, and I could see the city, and Nicholas wouldn't tell me what city I was in. He just didn't seem like that was important. He seemed like something was amiss or something was going awry, like different than he was used to dealing with. And he asked me like, do you know what's going to happen next in my timeline? And I was like, this is a weird question. I don't know. But somehow I had a connection to the information. And I said, well, if we're near Washington, D.C., that would be bad, because I didn't know why I would think that we would be near Washington, D.C., and just being like, oh, that would be bad, like no big deal, kind of just nonchalant, like.
So hang on, he asked you what would happen in his timeline or your
that's what he asked me, and I didn't realize what he was saying. I didn't realize that he was relating to me that his timeline was actually the one that we were in. You know, I was like, well, we're in his strange land, and he's my caretaker. He obviously is the boss. You know, he knows what's going on more than me. And so I said, well, you know, it'd be bad if we were near Washington, D.C. And I wanted to ask him what city I was in, and this piece of technology kind of floated over like a drone, kind of like flew over, and he grabbed it out of the air. He scanned it over his head, and then he turned into like, it almost looked like a machine person, but he looked like a person, but he had all white skin. He looked like, also like he could have been made of parts, but I don't know. They could have been, you know, they could have been organic. I think from what he explained to me, they were, you know, organic biological people. They just looked this way. And I got really scared and I freaked out because I had learned about transhumanism from Cosmic Disclosure. So I thought I was in this terrible, like, transhumanist land where they like turned me into a robot. I didn't know. And these people, they literally looked like, you know, in Hollywood movies where you see the androids and they have that white skin. They look like they're made of parts, but they look like they're very humanoid or human looking. And he looked like himself, but just turned into a white robot person. It was kind of freaky to me, but I didn't know where I was. So I ran over to some human looking girls, like young girls from the public. And I said, you know, I was trying to convince them never to turn into robots and let these devices scan their head, and don't let your government, like, don't give over to transhumanism. Don't let your government put chips in your hands. And I was like, desperately trying to convince these girls not to be transhumanists, and they just kind of laughed at me. They were about, I would say about 21 maybe, and they were just like, oh, I'd never do that. Being a biological organism is so cool. And I was like, oh, okay. They already know, you know, they must have some awareness, and they don't want to be robots, and they think being a biological person is the greatest thing around. And they used the same slang that I was familiar with. And I thought that was weird. And I was like, I don't know what's going on here. So I went back to talk to Nicholas, like, what is going on? I don't understand. And he looked like he was looking at the floor, like he didn't know what to do. And I thought, is he embarrassed? I can't even read their body language. They seem so normal, but I don't understand what's happening. I saw a sign that was in English, and I was like, where am I? I thought maybe I was on another planet. I thought I remembered something about alien abduction, but this didn't seem like we were on a spaceship. So I was like, I'm definitely not abducted by aliens, you know. And this sign was to the public, like a directional sign to tell people where to go when they got off the shuttle buses. But it was in English letters with English words, all capital letters. Like, I could tell you what the font looks like, and I could read the sign. And I thought, that's so strange. This public sign is in English. Where the heck am I? And I couldn't, after I came back, I couldn't remember specifically what was on the sign. But after I had a hypnotherapy session, my hypnotherapist helped me recall what was on the sign. And so I was like, oh, well, this sign, I was looking for the title of the hospital because I wanted to know where I was. But
what was on the sign?
it was a directional sign. So it would, you know, when you go to hospitals in our land, let's say you drive into the parking lot, there's maybe a directional sign like radiology over here and maternity this way. And, you know, if you need to see the emergency room or have surgery, and then you know where to go. So it was like that type of sign to tell people where to go in this facility when they would arrive. And apparently in my hypnotherapy session, I recalled the name of a doctor. That it was the only line that I had read on the sign, because I realized it was in English, and then I just kind of discounted the sign altogether because I was looking for the title of the hospital, and this sign didn't contain the title or any mention of the city that I was in, and that's what I was looking for when I was trying to read the sign, but it wasn't on there. So I just was like, oh, that, you know, I'll go ask Nicholas what's going on. So I went and I was going to ask him, you know, where am I? What city am I in? What's going on, really? I had no idea. They had crazy technology. They had nurse, ET nurse. They knew about transhumanism. And he just had his hand kind of like this. He was embarrassed. And he said, we don't have transhumanism here. We don't have transhumanism in this timeline. And that's when it hit me like, oh my gosh, this is a totally different timeline than my own timeline. That must be where I am. And he's a robot, so he must be lying to me about not having transhumanism, because that's what a transhumanist society would do, right? And so when they were telling me the truth, I thought they were lying, because we have cabal here. We've been lied to our whole life, and our society is, you know. And so he started communicating with me telepathically. And I've heard Corey Good talk about interfacing before, and that's the only, and I don't know what that is, but that's the only way I can relate to how I mentally conversated with this, my caretaker, Nicholas, with this being. And I know that Nicholas wasn't his real name. It's just the name that he told me it was to call him, because that was familiar to my ear. And that would be appropriate for me to call him. And so he started communicating telepathically, and it was maybe only a few seconds or a couple minutes that we had this mental conversation and exchanged a lot of information about how his timeline related to mine, and what was different, what had happened, and basically what I was doing at this facility. And one of the first things he said that stood out to me was, we don't have the military-industrial complex here like you know it. I was like, whoa, how did that ever happen? So he explained to me their history, how our history was the same, where it diverged. And basically and he was talking about the Ascension event. And I had to, when I came back, I had to really kind of unpack this mental conversation for myself, that basically if you had a conversation with someone and then you went off later and went about your day, and then someone asked you, oh, what did you talk about with that person? I want to know every little detail. You'd have to go back and think, oh, what was it that we said exactly in the order that we said it, what we talked about. So I outlined that whole conversation in the document that I wrote online about what was exchanged telepathically to me about his timeline versus our timeline, what was different. And that's when I really understood I was in a parallel timeline, and it was 2016 for both of us. We were in America. He didn't tell me that I was in Anaheim, California. I had to ask some, what I called them skater boys from the public after Nicholas went off. My impression was that he had to go talk to his supervisors about what to do with me, or what was going on with me, so he could understand me and what to do. And so that's when I really understood where I was. But up to that point, I had no idea. I had no idea I was in a parallel timeline.
As I sit here listening to you, my logical brain kicks in and says, oh my God, she just had some weird dream, which I would imagine that a lot of people who would be listening to you would think. And if any psychologists were watching this, they would be dissecting your psyche, saying, oh, that's just a fear of this, and this is her relationship with her mother, and blah, 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 right?
I bet they would.
That's what that would be going on. But what I know is, especially over the last few years, speaking with some of the guests that I've had on my show, that anything is possible. The slogan on my website and on my emails is, life is a journey of infinite possibility. And anything is possible, because we are creators, and we create with our minds, with our imagination. We create. And, but we're not just creating while we're in physical bodies, where the majority of us, the majority of creation is happening from a non-physical perspective, from a broader perspective. And that broader perspective creates worlds and dimensions that we come and play in these suits that we wear called bodies. And these bodies exist in different densities, and we're currently in a third dimensional density, and that's what we experience. and there are other physical body densities, but they're different frequency, different density. So
they had a different frequency than we did, and I felt like this was way too fantastical for me to just imagine up. I was like, I've had a dream journal before. I've written my dreams down, and I've experienced, trying to remember them pretty well. But this was, I wrote like a 32-page document about this experience, and I was like, this is way more than.
Well, okay. So what I want to know is
drummed up, from my own.
I want to know some of the details, because I really think the only reason that timeline and this timeline were colliding,
yes,
was that we are about to experience what they have already experienced, and that is, cosmic exposure, what's the word I'm looking for?
Post-disclosure.
Disclosure. Cosmic, full disclosure. And
yes,
I think, okay, they said to me, you don't think, They said, so what they're telling me is that, this conversation's happening and your experience is happening because we're being given some breadcrumbs, baby steps. Mm-hmm. And baby steps kind of make it confusing because we're not seeing the whole picture.
Yes.
But we're being led down a path where all this is becoming possible.
Yes.
I can't imagine, when I look out into the mainstream world, I can't imagine, how people, so they're saying to me that people can wake up pretty quickly. And what's really interesting is that, because I'm asking questions and I'm getting the messages from my guides, so they're telling me that
Nicholas,
you can have a thought, a belief about reality, and listen to someone like you and I talk like this and go, oh my God, that's crazy, batshit stupid crazy, and these people are just crazy, and be really adamant about that. And then in an instant, you can change your perception, and say, no, I never believed that, and actually forget that you believed something different, and now you're in a new reality. And that's actually what they've shown me about third dimensional perspective, because I look out into the world and the majority of people believe, they're inside this sort of very small box of belief. And I think, how are they ever going to all wake up? But they are going to wake up, and it's going to awaken, and it's going to happen reasonably quickly. Whereas my awakening has been over like 30 years of just like discovery and expansion and expansion. And it can happen, like, because I've spoken to a lot of people who've had, Lisa Medhus, whose son shot himself. She was brought up by militant atheists and really third dimensional, a doctor and a surgeon, and now she has a blog and a YouTube, and they discuss all sorts of phenomena, aliens and timelines and everything, and that's only happened in like a few years.
I feel like we're the guinea pigs, we're the test subjects of this, for this information, and how fast humanity is going to wake up.
Yes.
And because we're ready. And Nicholas said to me, in his timeline, this disclosure happened in the early 1950s, but it wasn't really until the late 60s or early 70s that society kind of calmed down and they were more awakened. They didn't have their ascension event yet, which is what they were waiting for, and that's why they were doing timeline healing, because they felt that would help, help everyone do that a little more easily. But he said that in our timeline, if this disclosure happened like it did in his timeline, our society would wake up fairly quickly, within 3 to 5 years, because we have the technology that we do now with the internet and communication, just being a globally connected society and information traveling so quickly like it does. So he seemed very hopeful for us that if we could do it, it would happen very quickly for us, whereas for his timeline, it did take a decade or so, maybe more.
Well, it actually has been taking hundreds of years already. Yeah. I mean, it's been taking hundreds of years, because in the late 19th century, there were people talking about manifesting out of thin air and the seances and talking to spirit and all that sort of stuff. But there were these like really secretive little groups, you know what I mean? Whereas I think in the 60s, the flower child hippie, the new age movement began. and it's sort of expanded and blossomed, since 2012 it's been exponential, because I've been involved in it pretty much my whole life.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is, so this is what my guides tell me about disclosure. They say that because the human consciousness is so polarized and divisive, we can't even accept and love and live in harmony with each other, with different religions, with different races, with different ideologies. So like the mainstream people would look at us and say, oh, you crazy new age people, you're all, what drugs are you on? And, so there's this constant judgment and bombardment of criticism against our own human race. And they said, until you guys can get, diversity and difference and come to this place of radical unconditional acceptance and love.
Yes. Compassion,
and we can't,
societal
and
compassion.
empathy. I mean, the divisiveness is so deeply sort of entrenched in us. It's like there's the rich and the poor and the black and the white and people that live in this suburb and that suburb and the kids at school, the different gangs that gang up each, the different. So they said, until you can start to heal that as a collective consciousness, we can't introduce you to your cosmic family.
Yes, exactly.
Because they're so different to you. And this is what I want to discuss with you, because
I noticed that in my experience too.
Mm-hmm.
I had an interaction with what I just call skater boys. They looked like stereotypical skater boys from our timeline, and I expected them to be these punk little kids and give me a punk attitude about asking them where I was. But they were so kind and just compassionate and open and receptive to receiving me. And I was just like, wow, my whole worldview about the stereotypes of these kids, and maybe they are skater boys in their timeline, but they are compassionate. The way that they see themselves and the world is totally different. They just have a societal compassion. They couldn't lie like we can because they had, telepathy and empathy. I noticed that, empathy. And I noticed that I thought that I was being lied to even when I was being told the truth. Like when Nicholas said, we don't have transhumanism in this timeline, I was like, oh, you're obviously lying because you're the robot, and that's what robots would say in a transhumanist society. And so I found that so interesting that I'm like, damaged goods being here in this timeline. I thought that I was being lied to even when I was being told the truth, and I thought these skater boys were gonna be little punks, and they were so kind, and just the light in their eyes was so kind.
What they were doing with you when I was listening to your story is they were experimenting with the third dimensional consciousness that we currently live in, which says, like there's just so much to talk about. I can get ripped off. People can lie to me. And so basically our mass media perpetuates a fear-based consciousness, which is just rife in our society, that says, look out, watch out, you're in danger. People are going to rip you off. Bad
things are going to happen.
Bad things are going to happen. And so we're constantly on the defense. You know what I mean? We're defending. We do it inside our families. We do it in our streets, on the road.
We do it in ourselves.
We do it, and this is the consciousness that has been, that is dominant in our society. And, when you go to places like India, it's even bigger. I remember that when I was in India, because of the poverty that exists there, there's just so much defense, and it's all about me and what can I get, because it's like a survival instinct. You know what I'm saying? So
I love that perspective. They were experimenting with what is third density consciousness. Like, I love that, because they were obviously fourth density already.
Exactly. And fourth density or fifth density would be the recognition that we're all one and we're all in this together, and that there's no such thing as survival, because if you're ever in jeopardy, because you're one, you will be helped. And, and so there's a lot of fear that's eliminated. Yeah.
I feel like they didn't have money there, and when Nicholas left, he left me there, and he was just like, stay here. But I didn't want to stay here. I wanted to get out in the city. I wanted to find a library. I want to get on one of these buses. And I was like, they don't have money. It's all going to be free. I don't have to pay money to get on the bus. I'll just find my way around. I'll ask these compassionate people where I am. So I was just like,
a utopian society. you know, people have been talking about this for years. There's this fabulous guy is he still alive? He might have died. He was like in his hundreds. And he created this utopian society and like an architect, you know, like it is possible. So you've been to a place that lives this utopian society. What I want to know is, so the fear from the Galactic Federation is that if we expose ourselves as our cosmic family, that, you know, Hollywood movies do this all the time. The aliens come and all the humans want to do is fight them because they're in a consciousness that says, I'm in danger.
And I have to fight you because
I'm in danger. So I watched recently on television Arrival, right, which is about the aliens. It's the latest.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's this arrival of this alien race, and the consciousness in the movie is like the consciousness, the third dimensional consciousness. What do they want? Are they going to kill us? We've got to watch out. We're in danger. So that danger, divisive, polarized consciousness.
We got to have war against them.
We've got to defend ourselves. We've got to have war against them. Exactly. So they've said to me,
there are no good alien invasion movies where they all come down and they bring us better technology and they smite out our shadow government and they give us, you know, quantum materializers and free energy.
Well, I have to say
that those movies. I want those.
Exactly. All the futuristic movies that Hollywood makes still perpetuates this idea of war. The fear. But I have to say the Arrival movie touched on, because there was no war, there was like a lot of countries talking about war, but the aliens came down to give us a new language, a universal language. And that was the sort of, if you're, sorry, I've just disclosed the movie, but
I love that.
But, you know, the thing is that the movie was still very much showing our consciousness of fear.
Yeah.
And the military might. So what I want to know is, when you were talking to Peter or Nicholas and you were asking about their timeline, when in the 50s, when disclosure happened in that timeline, how did that third dimensional fear-based consciousness not, you know, how did it change? Like,
well,
how did people not want to fight the aliens and get scared, and, you know, what happened?
For them, so he didn't specify the details around the event or who it was, but he said someone from the American government told the American people the truth about, and he meant the truth about extraterrestrials and flying saucers. And he used the term UFO to describe these things before this event, and he used the term flying saucers to describe it after. So someone from the American government, in the best interest and safety for the American people, which is how it came out as, is they told the American people, look, there are peoples and races from other planets, from the stars, visiting Earth. This is what their ships, you know, we've seen these flying saucers, there's this technology that's being used. And the Germans, I think it came out later that the Germans actually, in the world wars that we had just gotten over, they had developed this technology with help from these other races through mental connection. And I think all this kind of information maybe came out later that might have seemed woo-woo crazy to, you know, the third dimensional consciousness, but someone from the government with the best interest in safety and education for the American people did the right thing. They, you know, in a compassionate or act of, you know, they couldn't stand the wrongdoing of the secrecy and the direction the government would have headed if everything was kept secret and kept from the American people. And, you know, top secret, we're going to ally with these Germans who have this technology, and we're going to squander it for ourselves and not let anyone have it, basically, and not tell anyone. And anything about aliens needs to be covered up, and everybody needs to be slandered. You know, their careers, you know, need to be wrecked if they're spewing this conspiracy theory. And I think in the 50s, for our timeline, is when conspiracy theory, that term, became used. And so and I got the sense that after this happened, there was a shift in consciousness and belief. There was some societal uprising, or like societal upheaval or maybe chaos. I don't know if it was rioting in the streets or like to that point, but there was some disturbance in society because everyone has to change their worldview, their religion or whatever says they have to adjust to this new information that is basically, it's like if you lived on an island and your chief comes to you and it's like, oh, we're a whole planet and there's countries over there with people just like us and they talk differently and they got different food and different music, and you just have to change your perspective a little. And so that was an adjustment period for people, maybe about the first 5 years for sure. And then after that, it was about, okay, now what do we do? What are these, then they showed up and then they were like, oh, you did the right thing. And there was some kind of conflict between, I would say, more negatively polarized ETs and more positively polarized ETs on our planet or over our planet for the human, with human involvement, like Corey Good says, that's kind of happening now. And it's kind of a digital information war, and the good ETs and the bad ETs, they're trying to all, they're kind of fighting over us, even though it's not literally
well,
like
here's
that.
the thing. I haven't listened to much of Corey Good, so I don't really know what he says, but I'm only speaking to the people that I speak to on my show and my guides. So I speak to the Galactic Federation, and what they tell me is that our density has no negative ETs that are allowed to come play. And so we don't experience that. So
they could all be like neutral or like,
like
from our perspective, they're negative, but they're not really. I think that's what it is. Like from our perspective, they're negative. They're not.
The only negative thing that happens is the third dimensional polarized consciousness, basically. And a lot of people, like the whole conspiracy theory is based in fear. It says, they're lying to me. And so that's a fear-based thing. But, when you look at our society and how polarized we are, there's good reason that they're not disclosing, because people are not mature enough. They're not consciously evolved enough to be able to cope with the information. And so that's why disclosure hasn't happened. And my guides have said to me that, when you guys raise your vibration and feel more empathic and more connected, and come into your spiritual evolution, disclosure can happen. But until that happens, so that's why I'm asking you about this timeline, because obviously,
well, it seemed like for them there was an adjustment period, and it was about 10 years, and maybe after about 5 years they started showing up and being like, oh, hey, here we are, and they got benevolent assistance, is what I think Nicholas said. They got benevolent assistance from benevolent ETs to make the transition, and they got all the technology, released, and they were told the truth, and they didn't have internet, so it was a little slower, and their consciousness was their technology was at a different place, so it was a little slower to come about, maybe over about 10 years. But for us, he said, say, the president told everybody, and Trump, for us, Trump is a little bit like, even us Americans are like, who is this guy? What is he? He's just kind of, for some of us, we think he's just a whack job. But, if he came out to the American people and said and told us that there are extraterrestrials and flying saucers, and this is real technology, and it's how they visit our planet, and then maybe disclosing or exposing whatever he may know about the top secretness or the shadowy underpinnings of what is happening in our society. If he came out to the public in some, off the wall, like live broadcast or something, Jimmy Kimmel show, I don't know. If he came out and said, basically went against his job, went against all of the, things that he's been told not to do, and he told the American people about all of this stuff, it makes me wonder what transition would happen in the American country and globally as well, because from what I understand, other countries have released their UFO files. Their governments have acknowledged that this kind of thing is real, and they're kind of waiting on the US to be like, to wake it up, kind of thing.
So it's interesting that in your story, it happened before the election, and he was asking you about the election. Because I
had asked him about the message on the tag, on the monkey's tag, was Trump's defeat before you return. And I thought, oh, does that mean that Hillary's going to win? And after my experience when Trump won, I thought, oh, does that mean something's going to happen to Trump during his presidency or during his life before I return back to the hospital again? So that I could have, my perspective in the moment was that Hillary, this message was telling me that Hillary was going to win the election. So I asked Peter, I said, if something happens in my country while I'm here, would you tell me about it? And so I thought, that's what the message was saying. And then after Trump won, I was like, oh, maybe the message was actually saying something was going to happen during Trump's presidency, and that event would take place before they would abduct me back to the hospital.
So, what they've shown me about Trump is, because like when it happened, I was just in disbelief, but I had a bit of a chat to my guides, and this is what they've shown me about Trump. And it's just what you've said.
I was the only one that wasn't disappointed at work. I was like, come on guys, aren't you excited to see what's going to happen in our society?
Yeah, absolutely. We see that Trump is such a wild card. He's such a megalomaniac. He doesn't follow the rules. He thinks he's above the law. He
flaps his jaw.
He's so in ego that he may just be the very person to disclose, to go.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
elected.
Because he is just like, don't tell me what to do. I do it my way, and people love me. Like, he's such a megalomaniac.
He's already talked about the lizard people, and there was no weapons of mass destruction. You can find YouTube videos of him saying.
So he might just well be the one, but disclosure is happening, outside of politicians, because
and it has to.
People are waking up left, right, and centre. Some of the people I've spoken to on my show, like one of the reasons I'm having this conversation with you now, and I don't think that you are, batshit crazy, is because of Garnet Schulhauser, who was this conservative corporate lawyer for like 30 years, and in his mid-50s his spirit guide woke him up as a homeless man, and he's written about 4 books of his adventures. But basically Albert, who's his spirit guide, takes his astral form out of his physical form at night and flies him around the universes and shows him different planets, different realities. He goes to the spirit side and he sees a whole lot of his dead friends and dead people, like talks to people like Hitler and Elvis and all sorts of people and the Beatles.
That's great.
But in his upcoming book, which is about to be released, he asked me to do a review on it. He goes to a parallel reality, and he lands in New York. It's not the same parallel reality as you. It's a different parallel reality. And he's in his astral form, and he's in the ghetto in New York. Anyway, I won't go into what happens. People have to read. But he speaks about this different parallel reality that he visits in his astral form. And there's just something about Garnet.
That's so great.
Which
I've never, I've tried to look up research about people visiting other timelines like this, and I haven't been able to find very much stuff out there. So that's really helpful for me that you were telling me that someone else they've been to visit a parallel reality in their astral form.
And it's quite significantly different. It's not the same, disclosure. I don't know if disclosure happened, but there were some historical events that happened, that didn't happen, or that were different, that completely changed the course of history. And so in 2016, I think, when he wrote that, or when he had that adventure, it was significantly a different reality, although the same time and the same sort of physical. And he asked his spirit guide, Albert, he said, do I exist in this reality? And he said no, because he comes from Austrian descent. And he said, well, something happened that your parents didn't move to Canada, because he comes from Canada. and because of that, or that your ancestors didn't come from Austria to Canada, you know, your parents never met and you weren't born. So basically he didn't exist in that reality, but he said, but you do exist in other realities. And it's just...
Nicholas told me that I did exist in his timeline. He said that I was a teacher, and I got that I was a teacher of older children than preschool, and he said that I was a teacher and I had made a lot of good advances in education, but I felt there was more that I could do for humanity, so I had applied to this hospital facility, this facility, whatever it is, to have my timelines healed. And that's, you know, that's how, that's what happened. So it's so funny that he got to ask his guide about himself in that timeline, and his guide explained exactly why he didn't exist there.
Yeah. So you'll have to watch out for that fourth book coming out with that with that adventure. He finished it last year, but the publishers are taking a good time in releasing it. I don't know why, but his books are amazing. The first one's called Dancing on a Stamp, and I'll put the link onto this on the YouTube. You can find my conversations with him, and you can buy the books there on my Amazon link. But so I guess that, having explored that with Garnet, I wanted to explore more of this with you. I think that, possibly you can reconnect to your guides and have more information come to you. I don't think that what you've experienced is a one-time event.
Right. I certainly would put up more, make more videos or documents if I had another experience like that. And I think also after that experience, and what Nicholas explained to me during the telepathic communication, he said, we are all quantumly connected to ourselves in all of our timelines. And after that experience, I just felt like I was more quantumly, maybe telepathically connected to Nicholas too. So sometimes people have asked me, in that timeline you visited, who is Trump, or who am I, or who is this? And I'll connect into being quantumly connected to myself or to Nicholas in that timeline, and I'll answer their question. Like, I think Trump in that timeline is a businessman, but he's not very good at it, or something like that. And, my friend asked me, who do you think I am in that timeline? And I was like, oh, I see you in this jester outfit, and you are an entertainer, and that's how you help people realize archetypes to help them wake up and figure out who they are in the world. And he was like, that's so interesting, because I do that already. Like, this is not his profession, but he kind of does that with a he calls it sacred circus type of group that he's a part of. And I was like, oh, that's so funny that I didn't know, and so it seems like we're all a higher vibratory frequency of ourselves in that timeline. So it's like I feel more connected to that timeline somehow, and can exchange information. Yeah. So it's interesting.
So
it's
there's a lot more to explore, and because we're multidimensional in so many aspects. I mean, we're living all these lives in different dimensions on different planets in different times, like future lives. I'm very connected to my future life, even as a child.
Yes.
As a child, I would look around and I'd think, what the hell am I doing here? These people are so primitive. And like our medical system, I studied as a naturopath trying to find some answers to how people heal. And I found all of it archaic, all of it. And allopathic medicine, like drugs, I just look at chemotherapy and I think, we're going to look back at this in 20 or 30 or 50 years and we're going to say, how could we have tortured people like this? It's so archaic. Like, I feel like I live in a prehistoric age. So I'm so connected to my future self.
That reminded me, when you were talking about being connected to our future selves, I had a dream, and I feel like it's a memory from a future life, and it could be a memory from my future in this life, but I don't know it. But we had teleportation, and there were big cities, very tall, kind of like cities in the sky even, and the teleportation tubes that people would get into. And I was in my dream, I was thinking, oh, I have to buy my ticket for that teleportation, but I was kind of like unsure about the technology because it was fairly new. And I was looking on a screen of someone using the technology just so I could get more accustomed to it. And I was like, I have to buy my ticket for this thing. And the tube that people went into to do the teleportation had the Apple logo on it. And after I woke up, I was just laughing.
Of course, Apple. Yeah, it had the Apple logo on it. That's so funny. I know. Yeah, I felt the same about transport. So in some other life, I'm very involved in teleportation and transport, because in this life, I get so frustrated that you have to get in a car and sit in a car for hours. It's like it just doesn't make sense to me how. And then my guides have said to me, well, the thing is that you are in third density, but you can play with time. You can actually play with time. And I did when I was a naturopathic student in my mid-20s. I had to get to a school which was about half an hour away. I had to cross the bridge. Every day I was at this school, learning to be a naturopath, and I used to play with time. So I used to cover the clock up in the car and turn the music on and sing and be in a really high vibration all the way, like sitting in peak hour traffic, right? In peak hour traffic in the morning. But instead of looking at the traffic and focusing on the traffic and saying, God, I hate this traffic and I hate the city and it's taking so long and look at all the traffic. Instead of being in a negative vibration, I would be in a high vibration and sing all the way there. And I'd get there in like 10 or 20 minutes, which was impossible. It was impossible to do, but I would get there on time. And yet I sat in traffic. So I used to play with time. And,
I love that.
And you can. Just because you're in third density doesn't mean you can't play with time. And I remember someone was saying that they were with some other spiritual teacher, and he was showing them about time too. And they, to get from Sydney to Byron Bay is it takes me 12 hours, but it's about if you really speed, about 8 to 10 hour drive, right? It's 1,000 kilometers away. And he did this trip with some people in like 4 or 5 hours, because again, he was just playing with time. Like he said, we can expand and contract time. We can literally.
I was reading in a book once, I think it was a hypnotherapy book, but it was saying, people say we don't have enough time, I don't have enough time to do that, but really we are the masters of time, and we have all the time that we want or need to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was in my mid to late 20s when I was that I made peace with time, because I used to do that. I used to do that thing all the time. We don't have enough time. There's not enough time. I'm running late. And my second husband was really into being really early. And he was always freaked out about time, and I'd be really relaxed about it. And he'd say, we're running late. And I'd be like, just relax. And he was always amazed at my concept of time. Like I just, I had a different idea about time, and he learned to relax a bit more around time instead of feeling like he always had to be there early and he didn't want to be late. And he was like always stressed out about, running late, and everything happened in the perfect time, even where we'd hit peak hour traffic, we'd just move through it effortlessly and easily. And anyway, we could talk about
synchronicities that happen just help me, just remind me that we are the masters of time, and somewhere out there I must be controlling this reality or have planned it out somehow because of how synchronistic things happen. Yeah, well, absolutely. All the time.
Your higher self, your oversoul, or your broader perspective, or whatever, your God presence or divine self, or whatever you want to call it. We've given it a million names, right?
Right.
Is the orchestrator of this life, but you are co-creating with your higher self. So we still get to think and imagine and create from a third dimensional, physical mind perspective, but at the same time, our higher self is, I wouldn't say in charge, but co-creating with us. And I learned that from Natalie Sudman, who I interviewed a couple of years ago, who was blown up in a bomb blast in Iraq. And she was in non-physical with a buddy. She called her spirit guide, her buddy. And they were designing her injuries. And the time happened from the bomb blast to the time she woke up was literally a split second. Like the bomb went off, she was unconscious, and then she woke up. It was literally that fast. But she spent in non-physical, the time that she spent there was ages.
Yeah.
Months, maybe years, I don't know, but it was a completely different time experience. And she said that she was designing her injuries, and her guide were saying, well, let's make her blind in one eye, and let's look down that timeline and see how she manages as, blind. Let's take her hand off and see how she manages. And so they were doing different injuries and then looking down the timeline and seeing her life play out in that time.
Wow.
So they were playing with timelines and then choosing what would happen in this timeline, what injuries she would have. And so she had partial sight in one eye, and there's a picture of her and the president, because she was given a medal for being she wasn't in the army, actually. She was working as an archaeologist, but she was in Iraq and working with the army. And there's a picture of her and President Bush sitting on a hospital bed. And she's written an amazing book called The Application of Impossible Things, which talks about her NDE and
it's so great,
and her experience. So from that perspective, from our broader perspective, we are choosing what we will experience in different times. Yeah. There's a lot to think about, isn't there?
Well, I learned a technique to pick your timeline and pick what happens to you in your future based on certain choices that you wanted to make by going into meditation, basically, or self-hypnotherapy, and looking at the different timelines and then choosing with your higher self which one you want to experience. And it when you're talking about that story, it makes me just feel so empowered that we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. But, with every choice we make in every moment, we're choosing timelines.
Yes.
I've had this discussion on one of my shows. I think it was with Taryn, Lupa. We were talking about the Mandela effect. And there's a movie
I love that.
There's a movie called Sliding Doors, with Gwyneth Paltrow, and she misses the train and then she catches the train and in one reality she catches her boyfriend having an affair, and in the other reality she doesn't. And these two completely different timelines play out, and they show it in the movie and so that's happening.
Sliding Doors. I'm going to have to watch that one.
That's happening all the time. With every choice we make, we choose a different timeline. We choose. 11:11. I've just looked at the clock. 11.
Oh, great.
And Paul Selleck, another person I interviewed, an amazing channel. He was an American playwright, teacher at university for years, and last year he went full time as being a spiritual teacher and channel. His guides are always talking about choose your choice, your choice, your choice. So in any minute, in any second of the day, we're choosing, and that choice creates the different timeline, like it creates the reality that we're on. So and all your power, as the Seth book says, is in the now. Like
that's right.
You can change your reality.
Time doesn't exist. Everything is happening right now in the now.
Everything's happening right now in the now. And if you're living a reality that you don't like, that you feel like you haven't chosen, you can literally make a different choice now and you'll shift it completely. And it happens, and it can happen so quickly. And because time is speeding up, our density is shifting to a higher density. It means that we can literally play with time even quicker. We can shift our reality even quicker. So all things are possible. Life is a journey of infinite possibility.
It sure is.
Infinite possibility. So that's why I wanted to, we've got to go, because I've got to go. I've got something else to do.
Right.
I could talk to you, I've got more to ask you, because I didn't even ask you about you. And
about why I was calling myself Goddess Allison. It was because I wanted to teach other people how to be beautiful gods and goddesses in the world and manifest what they desire. And I didn't feel quite like a goddess when I picked this name, and I knew that I had to take on this vibration of this name so that I could grow into my own goddess self. Yeah. And so that's why I called it myself Goddess Allison.
Goddess Allison. Because that's right. I mean, we're all gods and goddesses, and we're all an extension of source energy. We are co-creating with our higher self. And so when when we quantumly merge with our higher self, or, you know, take on more of our higher self, we have that knowing that we are the creators of our reality.
Yes.
You know, we think that God creates, but we are the God, so we are the
We
creator.
are creator gods.
We are the creator gods, and you know, taking on that persona, taking on that vibration, just makes this ride of life so much more fascinating and interesting.
Oh yes, and I'm so glad that we could connect in this ride of life over the internet and share this information with so many beautiful humans who are listening.
It's so great. And Allison's doing a beautiful job of looking after our gorgeous, you know, galactic children that are coming in, you know, in preschool.
I've been in childcare, professional childcare, for at least 10 years, and I can tell the difference between the kids in preschool when I started and the kids now that are coming in. It's like, whoa, they're so turned on.
I know, it's amazing. So thank you, honey, for being on the show.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. And you can find out more about Allison. I'll put your link under the YouTube, but for people listening on audio, what's your website?
AllisonGee.net. So it's ALLISONGEE.net. And also for my life coaching, for just free information and how to manifest quickly, I have a website that is goddessallison.com.
Beautiful. Thanks, honey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, bye.
Bye. There we are. And remember, if you'd like to play with your consciousness and expand your horizons and find out more about who you are as a God, goddess, creator of your reality, join our webinar series, The Inner Sanctum. What we do is I invite some of the guests that I have on the show to come on each month, and we explore what they're talking about. Last month we had the beautiful Danielle Gibbons, who was channeling Mother Mary, and she gave such a gorgeous message about self-nurture and self-care and self-love, and especially as people who are teachers, spiritual teachers, putting themselves out there, nurturing other people. And next month we have Robbie Holtz. We're talking about the secrets of Aboriginal healing and awakening. Also, each month I put on a webinar. Yesterday we had Meet Your Spirit Guides, so connecting you to your spirit guides, your galactic family, and your mob. I call my guides my mob. We talk about manifestation. We talk about manifesting what you want, how you are the creator of your reality. So join us in the Inner Sanctum, and thanks for watching. I'll check you later. Bye for now.
Thanks so much for joining us for another enlightened conversation on Accentuate the Positive. If you would like spiritual guidance from my guides, Blissful Beings, go to KarenSwain.com for a reading, or to listen to more enlightened thought leaders share their wisdom. Go to the listen page on KarenSwain.com and choose who you want to listen to. All the podcasts are also available on iTunes. Remember to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, you name it, we're there. Until next time, bye for now.
If you feel like that's what you want,